What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this episode of Unmade for More podcast. It's your host, Enes here, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Jim McKelvey, and he's most known for co-founding Square with his co-founder, Jack Dorsey, who, for those that don't know, is also the co-founder and CEO of Twitter. Now, Jim is an entrepreneur I very much admire, but it's his story of how he built Square that fascinates me. And the story begins when Jim lost the sale of one of his art pieces because he couldn't accept a customer's Amex card. It was also around this time that Jack had been kicked out of Twitter, so they got together and decided to tackle the problem that Jim was facing as a small business owner. A little over a decade later, and Square is a publicly traded company with an annual revenue nearing $10 billion. I'm excited because today you and I get to learn valuable lessons from Jim's journey, which he shares in his new book, The Innovation Stack. Now, before we get into the show, if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell notifications. If you're someone who continuously likes to improve themselves, you'll love it here. Now, without further ado, enjoy the show. Welcome. I'm so pumped because today we have a very special guest. He flies planes, plays the piano, blows glass, and built a multi-billion-dollar empire. It's the one and only Jim McKelvey. Jim, thank you for making the time today.
Hey, thanks. Good morning.
Good morning. So is there anything that you can't do?
Oh my God. No. I do a lot of stuff, but I do it usually with a pretty big team. So I blow glass with a team. I usually fly with another pilot. I'm always a member of a team. I'm not a very good manager. I'm pretty good at starting things and coming up with, sort of new ideas. But once it becomes routine, I get very bored quickly, and I have to surround myself with people who are good managers because I'm just no good at the follow through.
Interesting. Okay, so usually I start by asking all my guests the same question, which is, if there's one topic or concept, relating to either life or business that you can teach the whole world, what topic would that be? But for you, I think it's only right to start with this one, which is, what is the biggest difference between being a millionaire and a billionaire?
Gosh, for me, almost nothing.
Really?
And this is weird. And I'll tell you the story. I was driving to my glass studio. This was 15, 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. Okay. And I was a millionaire, but I wasn't anywhere close to any of the stuff that you see these days. And I heard a radio contest where they're giving away 10 grand. And the radio announcer said, just think how $10,000 would change your life. And I thought about it, and I realized that if somebody gave me $10,000, it wouldn't change my life. And I was not rich at the time. I mean, I maybe had a net worth of $1 or $2 million, which I guess, it's pretty good. But
I was above average, right?
I was still working every day. I was still doing all my stuff, and I thought about it, and I was like, wait a second, that's an interesting question. Like, how much money would change my life? And I thought about this amount. I thought, well, maybe if I had $50 million, I would live differently, like I would live somewhere else but no, I couldn't, because I lived where I wanted to live. I lived in St. Louis, Missouri, which is an inexpensive town. I was heading to my glass studio. Nothing of my net worth is going to change that. I was hanging out with the people I wanted to do. I still had money to travel. I had all the stuff that I needed. Like, I just had everything that I could want. And so the only thing I thought of was that if I had a lot of money, I might buy a better airplane, because the airplane that I fly is a piece of crap. It's like 50 years old, and it's really. I mean, it's like a $23,000 airplane. Like, it's just got this old piece of junk, but it's perfectly safe, and I love flying it, and that's what I do. I still have the same airplane. So now, I mean, I don't know how many billions later, like, I still live in the same place. I still fly the same place. I still hang out with the same people. I'm still in the glass studio. I'm a little, more busy these days, but the difference for me has been almost nothing as far as the money goes, but people treat me way differently.
How so?
So, they all want to meet the money. Like, people don't want to talk to me. They all want to talk to my wallet.
Yeah.
So they show up and they're like, "Oh, Jim, we really want your opinion." It's like, really, or do you just want a check? So so that's been weird. But look, you don't get to complain about any of this stuff. I'm not complaining. It's I've been super lucky.
Yeah. No, how do you filter those people in your life? The ones that, are genuinely interested in you, Jim, and, just for the check.
I don't know. I hang out with my old friends. So I'm in Chicago today. I flew up here with a buddy of mine, whom I've known since 8th grade.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
I've known Jack for 25 years. The people who are closest to me are all ones I met, sort of pre Square's IPO. Now I've met a lot of really cool people since that, but the only ones that I really feel comfortable around are the ones who are themselves so rich that they're not interested in me for the money. Like, yeah, I've got a few friends like that, but that's kind of weird.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, so let's get right into it. I'm really excited because we get to, talk about your book, The Innovation
Which you
Stack,
read. Thank
which I
you.
read. Yes, absolutely. It's called The Innovation Stack: Building an Unbeatable Business One Crazy Idea at a Time. Right? From my understanding, and I want to get your input here. An innovation stack is basically dissecting, a successful person or company, right, and reverse engineering the decisions that they made to get to where they're at. So it's like looking backwards on a maze that's completed. Am I way
Yeah,
off?
yeah. Yeah, so I like the basics complete analogy. That's a good one. The reason I needed the word innovation stack was because I was trying to explain a phenomenon that it was really confusing, which was, how did Square survive an attack by Amazon? Back when we were a startup, not now, but like back when we were this tiny little pipsqueak of a company. Amazon copied our product and undercut our price. And when Amazon does that to a startup, the startup dies. Like, it just happens 100% of the time. Except in Square's case, Amazon was the one that relented. Like a year later, they were literally mailing Square readers to all their soon to be former customers. So to explain that, I went on this journey of basically research to find any other companies that had happened to. And I found there were other companies throughout history that had the same phenomenon, and they all had this thing. And I needed to name the thing. And the thing is this, I called it an innovation stack, but an innovation stack is really a way of creating new solutions. And it's not intuitive. At least it wasn't intuitive to me. So it was one of these things like, oh, I gotta explain this. So that's how the book showed up.
And like you said, one problem leads to, a set of other problems, right? And in
Yeah.
Square's, case, and maybe your career as a whole, how did you know that you were on the right track? Because what you guys were doing at Square was kind of legal, and it's never been done before, right? So how
Yeah.
did you know that you were making the right decisions?
Well, we didn't. I mean, we were making decisions, and there's the only way you know that you're right is if you're copying somebody who you know is right. So in other words, if
Uh,
what you're doing is so similar to what everybody else has done that you can just do what they did and very much expect the same result, then you're pretty comfortable that you're going to get the same results. In our case, because we were doing stuff that had never been done before, we literally had no idea if it would work, if people would like it, if it would be ultimately accepted. And so we charged ahead without any guarantees.
yeah, and were there, at any time that you felt like maybe it couldn't be done, or you wanted to throw in the towel, and what kept you going?
Well, it was funny because we actually hit that moment halfway through the first day. So, the first day was Jack and me, and then we had a programmer that we'd hired. So the three of us were all working together, and I was the weakest programmer of the three of us. So I was doing all the business stuff, and these two guys were coding in the room next to me. And I turned to them and I said, "Guys, what we're doing is illegal." Like, there was like literally within like an hour of looking, I found this specific law preventing this thing, one of the things that we had to do. So, and that would have been a good day to quit, right? You're halfway through the first day. But neither Jack or I were very sort of convinced that that was a smart law. I mean, a lot of these laws are written there are laws against, the number of chickens you can keep in your house. And I live in a place where nobody keeps chickens in their house. There are a lot of all, sort of antiquated laws. So this was not some sort of, thou shalt not kill like law. It was this technicality that seemed stupid, and we're like, oh, I'm okay breaking that one. So we'll figure that out later. And and literally by the end of like the second week, I'd found 17 laws, rules, and regulations that in some way we were violating with each transaction. So it could have been more than 17. I just remember I counted up to 17, and at that point I was like, come on, there's just more stuff. But yeah.
And you guys, and you still decided to just go with it.
Well, yeah, because we were focused on a problem. We had a goal in mind, which was to create a way for small merchants like myself to have fair access to the credit card system. Like I was prevented from making some sales because I couldn't take certain forms of payment. And if you're selling something, like it's heartbreaking to make something and then have your customer right there, and your customer wants to pay you for it and you want to sell it, but now you can't, hook up that last little bit because, they've got an Amex card and you don't take Amex, or some other sort of weirdness. So I was personally very motivated to solve the problem. And then, Jack was also sort of bought into this because he saw this bigger vision of a payment being some sort of honest communication where, if you're exchanging value, that's actually information. And he really thought that was interesting. So we were committed to doing it, even though we thought, at least initially, that it might not be possible.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get into your childhood. Take us back. I know you grew up in Ladue, Missouri, right? You're the oldest of
St.
three
Louis,
boys.
I was born in the city, and we moved out to the county when I was in grade school.
Okay. Yeah. So you're the oldest of three boys. Your dad was
two boys. Well, actually, I technically have kind of I technically have one brother, but I've kind of adopted another guy. I've got a half brother.
Oh, okay.
I call him a brother, but he's really he's not a biological brother. It's like they're three boys. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And your dad was the dean of the engineering school and chemical engineering professor at WashU.
Yep.
And your mom was a stay-at-home mom,
Yep.
sort of like my mom. For those listening who are not familiar, with your story, can you paint us a picture of your childhood?
Pretty idyllic. Grew up in this little suburb that was very nice. Very little crime, very little poverty, just this wonderful, like idyllic little enclave. My father was a wonderful man who, never lost his temper. I never heard him swear more than 3 times in his entire life. So I knew him for 54 years, or 53 years, I guess. He swore 3 times, and they were sort of minor ones, like all stuff you could say on TV, right? That was my dad. Mom was a different story. Mom was this sort of badass New Yorker who I found out later after my mom died that my grandfather had worked for the mafia during Prohibition.
No way.
I mean, like this is my mother's side of the family. But my mother loved my father. The family had no problems, like zero problems, up until after I was in college. My mother started getting depressed and eventually killed herself. And that was sort of the watershed moment in my life, because up until that moment, I basically hadn't lived in the real world. And I hadn't been really aware of, how much pain people go through. And my mother, was a tough person, and she sort of hid it from us. She certainly hid it from me, maybe not my dad, but mom was tough enough to sort of keep her children protected. But that protection was really this huge weakness. So after mom died, I went through this huge crisis, and then I moved to the city, to like this bad part of town. Like I had bullet holes in my car. Like,
wow, really?
Yeah.
How old were you at the time?
I was 22, 23, something like that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, actually, I thought the car looked better with the bullet holes. Like if you look at me, I don't have much street cred, but rolling around in a car that's been shot up by a 9mm like that, I felt kind of cool for a while until it all started rusting out. But yeah, I mean, I went. Mom's suicide really put me in touch with a whole world that I had not been aware of. And since then, I've spent a lot of my time with people who are, well, like my friend Bob. I talk about my friend Bob in the book. So Bob called me 2 days ago. He's been arrested again.
Oh, man.
So last time he was arrested, he fought with the cops. And so they beat the crap out of him and he shot him. This time, supposedly, he wrestled the gun away from the cop, and they struggled, but he shot the cop, and so they set a huge bail. And he told me all this, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And he's like, "Jim, I need you to come down and bail me out again." And I was like, "God, Bob, I shot a cop," and.
Oh my God. I shouldn't be laughing, but
no, you shouldn't be laughing, but this is my friend Bob. Like, this is the guys I hang out with, and then he said, "April Fools."
Oh my God.
He totally got me. And the thing you got to know is that, like, you have to take this seriously from Bob. Like, when Bob tells you that he's been, like in a physical fight with a policeman and there's been a discharge of a weapon, like, that's actually happened. Like, so when he calls you on April 1st to do this, like, he set me up so good. He totally got me. But like, these are the sort of people, like, I volunteer. Like, I love these people. They're so genuine. None of them cares a bit about Wall Street or any of that stuff. Yeah, and some of them are nuts, but they're wonderful.
Yeah, you gotta laugh, and you gotta have that little crazy. We all have that craziness inside of us, right?
Yeah. And the fact that Bob could call me on April Fool's Day and get me, like, he got me. He totally nailed me.
That's hilarious.
My God.
That's hilarious. So I'm really curious. What was the biggest lesson that you learned from your mom?
It wasn't to not be afraid. It was to move even though I am afraid. Like, Mom put me in some situations where I was pretty scared. But she always expected that both of us would be able to handle them. So I would say she was fearless, but she wasn't fearless. She was a lady who had, like, terrible fear of heights and would climb water towers just because she didn't want to be the person who couldn't climb if she needed to climb. So, like, I remember her, climbing up a water tower. And her hands are sweating, so she doesn't have a very good grip on the the rails. And I'm like, "Why are we doing this?" She's like, "Oh, well, I'm really afraid of heights, so I want to climb this water tower," which was sort of that lesson of, even if you're afraid, and look, this kind of gets back to what I do in the book. Like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to do stuff that's never been done before, you are going to be afraid if you're in any way sane. Like, because you're spending your whole life almost always in this nice, steady stream of positive reinforcement that everything you do is good, and there's a checklist, and there's an expert, and there's some credential, and there's somebody telling you, "Oh, you're doing a great job," And as soon as you start doing something totally different that's never been done before, you're going to lose all that support. So you are going to go from a moment where you feel very comfortable to a moment where you feel very uncomfortable. Now, the question is, what happens when you become uncomfortable? How do you react to that? And the answer that I sort of learned from my mother is, you're going to be afraid, but you can still function even if you're afraid. And maybe that helped us when Square was, breaking 17 laws and rules, because, like, I'd been in situations where I wasn't completely where I was supposed to be. And I was, aware of the fact that, look, some rules you never break. Some rules, yeah, you can let that one go for a while, and so I think Mom really prepared me for that. And then, what I tried to do in the book is explain to people, look, I can't give you a checklist in my book on how to do the thing you need to do that nobody's ever done before. You're going to have to figure that part out. But what I can do is I can give you first of all, a lot of encouragement and all these stories, so that when you are there, you will recognize where you are, and you will be able to say to yourself, oh yeah, I read Jim's book, and right now I shouldn't be getting, congratulatory calls and emails from all my friends. Like, I would expect my parents to call and go, what the hell are you doing? Because that's what they're going to do. Like, if you're doing something that's really radical, your friends, the people who love you the most, are going to call and say, what are you thinking? Why would you do that? Come back to the herd. Come join us where it's safe. Because it's not that they don't want you to succeed. It's that they don't want you to get killed. Like, they're genuinely trying to protect you. And so the people who love you most are sometimes the biggest drag on an entrepreneur, because they want to protect you. Well, if you don't even recognize that that's happening, you may just say, oh yeah, I'm going to stop. And you shouldn't stop. I mean, maybe you should, but like, you should at least know that it's possible to do something for the first time.
No, totally. That's an important point that you just brought up. It's usually the closest people to us that are dragging us down the most, right?
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily dragging us down, but like, and I'm not blaming these people.
Right.
Like, these are the people who love me the most. These are the people who tell me when I'm screwing something up. But a lot of times they will do that because in their worldview, which is a worldview that doesn't include doing stuff that has never been done before. Because look, you can live your whole life and never do anything new. Copy your whole life. You can be an entrepreneur. You can start a company. You can be super successful. You can be rich. You can whatever thing you want to do, you can copy somebody who's done it before you. But, and this is sort of the main message in the book, like, there's probably going to be a time in your life when you encounter a problem that mankind has not solved. They just haven't figured this out. Maybe it's a big problem, maybe it's a little problem, but nobody's done this yet. Okay. And it's a problem. And you can then at that moment say, well, I choose to solve it, but if I'm going to choose to solve it, I'm going to have to take a step off the known universe and go into this unexplored area. I'm just going to have to do stuff that I don't have a YouTube video to guide me through. And in that moment, all the rules change. All the stuff that you've been taught, in some cases, works backwards. So this is really terrifying. And if you're not prepared for it, it's even more terrifying. And I made that mistake for like 20 years. Like, I would do stuff at my companies and it wouldn't work. And I'd go to my friends who, had successful companies, and I'd say, hey, Howard, how did you solve this problem? He's like, oh, do this, call this person, and he'd give me a checklist. He'd show me how to do it. I'd go back, I'd do his checklist, and it would make it worse. Like, it would blow up in my face. And I'd be like, God, I must be such an idiot, because this kept happening again and again. And it wasn't until I actually finished the research for the book that I saw the pattern in my own life, which was that, oh, wait a second here. A lot of the rules reverse if you can't copy. Like, if you're in this world of experts and the ability to copy formula that are known to work, there's a whole skill set for that all of us really are good at. But as soon as you can't copy, like, how do you price a product? How do you hire a team? How do you manage a team? How do you keep performance metrics? How do you go to market? How do you treat your customers? Like, all of those things are different, and they're meaningfully different. And if you copy what everybody else is doing and you're an innovator, it might blow up in your face. So I wanted people to have a roadmap so that if they got into a situation, they would at least say, oh, okay, I don't exactly know what to do, but at least I know that it's possible, that other people have done this before. And this is probably a time when I should feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's like in your book, you say, I think there's way too many people that call themselves entrepreneurs, but really they're businessmen, right?
Yes.
And it's like being a tourist versus being an explorer, right? Yeah. Tourist having the map, the guides, which is the businessman. The entrepreneur is going out and exploring. Is that about right?
It is. And so, like, imagine that we're going to take a trip together. I say, okay, pack your bags. Yeah. I could pick you up my crappy old plane. We're going to fly somewhere.
Hey, let's do it. I'm down.
Oh, cool. Right. All right. So we're going to do that, and all of a sudden, you've packed for a weekend in a city. You brought nice clothes and some fancy shoes and maybe some cologne. Okay, and I land us in a grass strip in the middle of the jungle. And you brought luggage with wheels on it and friggin' hair gel, and I brought a Bowie knife and some salt tablets or something, first aid kit. Like the journey you take if you are going to a civilized city, you pack differently for that than if you're going out into the unexplored wilderness. And this is sort of like the analogy I draw between business people and entrepreneurs. I use entrepreneur in its original definition, the 100-year-old definition that Schumpeter, the economist, coined, which basically meant somebody who was doing something new, which meant that by definition, entrepreneurs were not copying. And it was this word that he coined because he needed to describe these weirdos. So that's like being an explorer. You don't know what you're going to find in the jungle. You might find, friendly animals. You might find unfriendly animals. Like, can you eat that berry? I don't know. Do you want to be the first to find out? Don't lick the frog for the first time. Don't be the first person to lick the frog, right? Or maybe you want to. I don't know. There's some good frogs out there, I understand. But the point is, if you don't know what travel you're about to take, you pack the wrong stuff. So I needed to use the word entrepreneur because look, today the word entrepreneur means anybody who started a business. Like I can be a flower entrepreneur. I can set up a flower shop. Okay, well, flower shops have been around since the Middle Ages. This is not a new concept. Coffee shops have been around for hundreds of years. This is not a new concept. Like that, in my definition, is a business person. The entrepreneur is doing something that has never been done before.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree. And I think social media has like changed it and made it easier for people to think that, they're entrepreneurs because I don't know, because it's cool, I guess. Now it's a cool thing where, back when you first started, it was kind of the crazy thing to do, right?
I was not cool when I became an entrepreneur. My friends looked at me crazy. They thought I was an idiot. I actually lost some friends because they were so worried about me. They couldn't be in touch with me anymore because it was stressing them out too much.
Really?
Yeah. I lost 2 friends that way.
Wow. And did they end up coming back, or did they just?
Well, I mean, everybody comes back now.
Oh yeah, everybody comes back now.
A lot, one of them has not. There's still one out there, but I get emails from people I haven't met in 30 years because, actually right now is admissions time for all the schools. So I'm getting, if your kid's on the wait list, I'm probably going to get an email.
Yeah.
I can't help. By the way, I can't help you. The engineering school is I do not control admission to the McKelvey School of Engineering. I have nothing to do with that. That was named in honor of my father.
James, right? Is that James?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. By the way, congrats on the. I know there's like a new building, the James McKelvey Senior Hall or something. It said it was going to open in spring. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's a new building in my father's honor, and they named the whole school after him. I consider it after my dad and I had the same name, so they say it's named after me, but I say it's named after him. So.
Nice.
Doesn't matter.
Speaking of college, I know you went to, like you just mentioned, Washington University in St. Louis, and got a degree in economics and computer science. Now, what I found interesting was, as a freshman, you had no experience programming or working, on computers, but you wrote your own textbook. What prompted you to do so?
Oh, I got pissed off. I got upset. It was one of those things. I was taking a class as a freshman and the textbook was terrible. And it was written by the professor, which really bothered me because, the professor was making like $5 a copy or some sort of, royalty on this really terrible textbook. And I just blurted out to my roommate. I said, look, I could write a better textbook than this thing. And he said, well, why don't you? And I was like, okay, I will, and so I spent my freshman year rewriting the textbook that I didn't like. And got the darn thing published. I mean, I got the book published, and then the publisher asked for a second book, So by the time I was a sophomore or a junior, I had 2 books that were, legitimately published, not like this self-published stuff, but I mean, like, this was the publishing house was paying me royalties and giving me an advance to write this book, or these books. And that had this weird effect because it gave me this reputation as an engineer that I didn't really deserve. I'm not that good an engineer compared to really good engineers. I'm not in their league, but I was always put on their teams because I had this reputation. So I learned how to work with people who were way smarter than me. And that was probably the best thing I learned in college, was just how to be on a team where I'm the weakest link, but I can still make everybody stronger. Like I am the best assistant you will ever have. Like if you're working with me, like if you have something that I need you to do, everything in your life gets smooth. Like your laundry gets done. Like I would get dates for people. I would like every other problem in your life disappears when you're working with me. And all of a sudden, all you have to do is concentrate on the one thing that I need you to do. It's just like, I've been doing that since I was 20. Yeah. That's my skill.
That's an interesting perspective
I'm a
on leadership.
personal assistant,
No, thank you for sharing that. I think it's also really important, back to like the textbook, is, for my listeners to understand that just because, you don't understand something, or you don't feel like you're qualified to do so or do something, right? If you're committed, you can achieve whatever it is that you want, right? And you say in your book, commitment can substitute for qualification.
Yes. And also, your listeners should realize that nobody is qualified to do the first time. Like the first time anything is done in human history, it is done by somebody who is not qualified. So like if you land a backflip, like let's say you're the first human in history to do a backflip. Somebody had to be it, right? There
Right.
was some way back in history. Somebody figured out, hey, I think I could do this, right? That person was totally unqualified to do it. The first time it's done, you are not qualified. So if you feel unqualified, then you have to ask yourself, am I just being lazy? Like, is this something I could go out and get qualified for and be prepared for? Or is it something where I just literally have to be willing to try and probably fail, try multiple times until I become the first person in history to do this thing, So maybe nobody's landed a triple backflip, right? I don't know. I don't know. But like, if you want to be that person, it may be humanly possible. We could probably calculate the biomechanics of it. And maybe you should be the first. But you're not going to be qualified.
Yeah. No, yeah, just go ahead and try it, right?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So fast forward after you graduate college, I think it was in 07, 08. You started Square, right? With your co-founder and friend, Jack Dorsey. And for those who don't know, Jack is also the co-founder and CEO of Twitter. Can you share the story of how you and Jack initially met and how you reconnected years after to start Square?
Oh yeah. So Jack's mother, Marcia, owned a coffee shop in the neighborhood where I told you I lived in a bad neighborhood. Well, Marcia had a coffee shop in sort of a slightly less bad neighborhood that was kind of close. And we would go in there and buy chocolate covered espresso beans, because this was before you could get prescription Ritalin, out of vending machines. And it's how we kept the staff awake. Like that's how we chewed these things to stay awake. So Marcia was affectionately our drug dealer. That's how I laughingly refer to Marcia, who's awesome. And she told us that her son liked computers, and we were working with computers, and we were actually in a desperate situation. We'd made this huge mistake on a database and needed help. And so we hired her son to be part of this sort of SWAT team of people to come in and just help us do this mountain of work with a really tight deadline.
And that was for
Jack,
Mira, right?
That was for Mira,
company.
yeah. So Jack showed up. He was 15 years old. He pulled an all-nighter with us the first day at the office. We sent him home, like 5 a.m. He got in all sorts of trouble with Marcia. Like it was terrible. But Jack came back. I mean, he like pulling an all-nighter with us made him part of the team. And so, we became, work colleagues, and then eventually sort of friends, because Jack's a cool guy. And then we started Square together 15 years later.
Yeah. So, like I said, in 2008, Jack stepped down as CEO from Twitter, and you met up in St. Louis. And at the time, you were working as a glass artist, right? How
Yes.
did the idea come about, and what inspired you to start Square?
So Jack and I decided to start this company, and we'd spent a week and a half brainstorming in San Francisco. I was going to move out to San Francisco. We'd hired our first programmer already, and we were going to go, go build this idea of Jack's, which was sort of this journaling app or something. I don't think either one of us was very excited about it, but we were sort of kind of out of time because we'd hired this guy and he was starting. So I went back to St. Louis to pack up, and when I was in my studio, I got this order for this piece of glass that I really wanted to get rid of because it had been on the shelf for years and it was ugly, but really expensive. Yeah, by the way, just because I think something's ugly doesn't mean you get a discount, right?
How
But
much do those pieces go for, by the way? I'm just
they're
curious.
like $2,500, I think it was
Oh, really?
how
Like
much that
that?
piece was. Yeah,
Wow. Okay. I
yeah.
didn't know that.
So I was trying to sell this piece and I lost a sale because I couldn't take an American Express card. And I was really upset. And I looked down at my iPhone, which I was a phone order from a lady in Panama, actually. And I thought to myself, wow, this iPhone magically turns itself into whatever I want it to turn itself into. Like it becomes a book or a TV or like it'll become a GPS if I needed
Yeah.
to. And it wouldn't turn itself into a credit card machine. And I thought, well, I should make it magically turn into a credit card machine. I called up Jack on the iPhone and I said, hey, man, I think I know what we should be doing. Like we should be building something so that I can get paid. Like that was it. It wasn't like we should build this thing to empower people of the world. No, it was like, man, I'm pissed. I just lost a sale. Like I want to fix this. I want to fix this problem that I personally have. So it was a very personal problem. And I was the focus group. So when I talk to the team, we put together a team to build this, they would always say, hey, Jim, could you use this? Do you want this? Do you like this? And then we found a flower vendor who used it, but it was really, it was a glass blower, a flower vendor, and a stunt pilot. That was the focus group that built Square.
That's funny. And what I found interesting was, you guys weren't starving. I mean, you guys were well off. You and Jack, could have
Oh yeah,
retired with the money that you.
we were both multimillionaires at the time.
Yeah. So why, give yourselves a headache and start another company? I mean,
Well, I mean, being rich is only interesting if you actually have the ego to spend the money. Jack was already very wealthy for having started Twitter. He lived in a one-room apartment because that's where he wanted to live. He could have bought a castle. He didn't buy a castle. I mean, I live in a house with a 2-car garage, and I had to fight to get the 2-car. Like when I bought it, it had a 1-car garage, and I was like, honey, do you want to park in? Because St. Louis has terrible weather. He's like, you want to park on the street today? I need to charge up my car. And we're like, hey, wait a second. We can get a 2-car garage. So Jack and I were not. It wasn't about the money. It was about the problem. And look, I mean, it's a payments business, and you're touching money, so you have to have good economics. But it wasn't. I going back to that story of me coming into the studio, like the big lesson of that radio contest where they were giving away $10,000 was that no amount of money was going to change the way I did anything. Nothing that counted. Like it wasn't going to change where I worked or who I hung out with or what I ate or what like nothing was going to change. So at that moment I decided, well, I guess I'm rich, which was weird because like I wasn't rich by any modern standard. I was just like sort of middle class. But because I'm so cheap and I don't care about the expensive stuff, well, then money doesn't matter. So you give me more money, nothing changes. So money, like that's my definition of rich. Rich, you become rich at the point where I can give you an arbitrarily large amount of money and nothing in your life changes. So Jack and I both hit that point pretty early. I mean, I'm not saying he hasn't changed a little bit in the last couple of years, nor have I, but in the early days of Square, I mean, we weren't weren't suffering. We lived where we wanted to live. We hung out with the people we wanted to hang out with. We still do.
Yeah. Okay. So a few years into Square, August 13th, actually, 2014, Amazon announced that they would be creating a competitor, basically to Square, a credit card reader. It wasn't as beautiful as the design that you made, right?
But it worked better.
Right.
Theirs actually read the card better than mine did. Yeah.
Yeah. And they undercut your prices by, about 30%.
Yep.
What were your thoughts when you first heard that news, and what was it like going into that office that day?
It was like having the doctor come in to your waiting room and say, sit down, and I think you need to gather your family around before I tell you what I have to tell you. Like, it was just sheer mortal terror, because at the time, no startup that had fallen in Amazon's gun sights had ever survived. Like, this was as close to a death sentence as you could get, except that we were so busy. We had so many customers, and we were growing so fast that even the fact that Amazon was attacking us didn't change what we were doing. We looked at it and we thought, well, what can we do to get Amazon to back off? And the answer was, Amazon doesn't back off. They're Amazon. Like, they're not gonna back off. And so, like, oh well, what could we do to fight these guys? And the answer was, well, we got enough problems just keeping a million small merchants happy with all their little problems. And so we were pretty busy. Like, well, we can't really do anything else. And so we didn't have anything we could do. So we just did nothing.
Yeah, you just continue to serve your customers and focus on their needs.
Yeah, and that was the amazing thing, because then Amazon, a year later, it was actually on Halloween. On Halloween, they announced that they were quitting, that they were giving away. They were getting out of the business, and they were going to give us all their customers. They were going to transition all their customers to become Square customers. Yeah, that was talk about trick or treat, man. That was like the extra big candy bar.
Right. First they want to eat your candy, and now they're giving it to you.
Yeah. We got we got the sprinkles on that one. It was amazing, and that's that's what led me to this journey that led to the book and the research and the innovation stack and all that stuff. Because I was so happy we survived. But I also had this weird survivor's guilt, when there's an explosion and 500 people die and one guy lives, like that one guy has this torture. It's like, how come I'm the guy that didn't get killed with everybody else? And at least I felt that way. I felt like, why did Square survive? And could it just been luck? And I don't believe in that. Like, I believe in getting lucky, but I don't believe that you can't explain a phenomenon, because I'm a scientist at my core. So I went on this research quest. It took me 2 years. And what I finally had to do was I had to find other companies throughout history that had, when they were a startup, been attacked by an incumbent that you would say would just wipe the floor with these guys. And yet the opposite happened. The startup one, and I found all these companies, and all of a sudden I saw this pattern. I was like, oh my God. So then I thought, well, wait a second, Jim, you're being an idiot here, because you're studying history, and history is really good if you're being selective. Like, it's called selection bias. So you can pick examples from history to prove anything you want. Like, if you want to prove that everybody on the planet has grown to be at least 7 feet tall, right? Like, we can pick enough skeletons from selected graves to prove that everybody who in history has been 7 feet tall or taller, like this, you can prove anything as long as you're selective enough. And this selection bias is really hard to avoid, because all the people that I was studying were dead. So one of them was still alive. His name was Herb Kelleher, and he was the founder of Southwest Airlines. Now, Herb is a legend. He was such a great guy. And I couldn't believe it, but he agreed to see me. So I flew down to Dallas with all my research, and I basically laid it at the foot of the master. And I said, look, I know you think a tech payment company in San Francisco has nothing in common with an airline in Dallas, but I think your company and my company are basically living through the exact same thing. You just got there 30 years early. And Herb looked at this and he was like, yeah. He's like, this is what happened to us. He's like, there's some other things that you didn't notice. And he explained them to me and I was like, oh my God, that's really cool. And then he basically said, how are you going to share this with the world? Like he asked me what my intention was with all this research. And it was like getting a homework assignment from your idol. Like there's a guy, I mean, I idolized Herb Kelleher. Like he was a badass to end all badasses. Like he was such a cool guy. He smoked like a fiend. He had a tattoo when a tattoo was offensive. Like he put a tattoo on his arm and he was like, I am showing you what I believe, put it on his arm. Like no executive had any ink on him except for Herb Kelleher in the Fortune 500. Nobody's chain smoked through Federal Reserve meetings except Herb Kelleher. Like Herb was just a badass to the core, and he was a wonderful, lovely guy. And he basically said, Jim, you gotta share this. And I was like, oh crap, I gotta write a book. So that's how the book came to be. Like it was getting a homework assignment from, the closest thing I ever had to a, sort of a mentor.
Yeah, and it was a comic first, and he told you, hey, this is not going to work out, right?
Exactly. So it was a comic book. Because I didn't want to write a business book because I hate business books because they're deadly boring. So I did a graphic novel, and it took me like a year. And I called Herb and I said, Herb, you're going to love this. I was like, I'm making a graphic novel, and he got real quiet and he was like, that sounds terrible. He's like, that just sounds, he's like, I want to think about it. And then he thought about it and he sent me this email basically saying, if you're going to do this as a comic, leave me out. He's like, I don't want any part of that. And he was right. And he was right for the following reason. Comics are for heroes. You tell the hero story in the graphic novel format. Like Herb was one of my heroes, so it seemed appropriate for me to make him this caped guy, right? A.P. Giannini. Giannini actually wore a cape because it was back in the 1800s. That was actually the fashion. But like, the reason we read comics is to read about the hero, and the hero is different than us. The hero has X-ray vision, or bullets bounce off the hero, or at least he's rich. Like even if it's Batman, like Batman's just like a badass rich dude with like toys that you'll never get, right? Like these are the heroes. They're not like us. And to tell the story that I needed to tell as a hero story would have been totally off-putting to all the people, because what I'm telling you and the actual essence of the innovation stack is that all of these people, Herb Kelleher, like Giannini, like all these people that I studied who became multi-billionaire, world-conquering entrepreneur badasses, they all started as sort of normal, clueless, unqualified, regular folks, right? People with no experience in the industry, people with no special superpowers. I mean, unless smoking, 3 packs of cool menthols.
That's pretty impressive, right?
I mean, Herb had a superpower. He could actually, exhale an entire cloud. Like he could build his own cloud if he wanted. But I mean, like that. These are not heroes. These are people who discover this thing that I sort of discovered, usually by accident, but they stumble upon this thing that's insanely powerful. And I go through the math in the book of why innovation stacks are so incredibly difficult to attack, and why Amazon, powerful as they were, couldn't do it. So that was the whole thing. But if Herb hadn't stopped me, I would probably have a much more popular, but much less useful book. Like I think the graphic novel would have sold better because, hey, it's cool. Who wouldn't want to like read a graphic novel? But it would have been intimidating, and it probably would have had the wrong effect, because what I want to do with the innovation stack and with your podcast and with, all this media that I'm doing right now is just get people off the sidelines when they see, like when you go through your life, do everything you want, copy everything, but there will be a couple of moments, just a couple, where you have the opportunity to advance humanity and do something that's never been done before. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know how you live, but like you're probably gonna live many, many years. You'll probably see a couple of those moments. If you see that moment, will you A, recognize it, and B, understand what it takes to step across that line and do something that has not been done before? And if we can get a couple million people who would not otherwise step across that line to step across that line, then the world's going to advance. Like that's what humanity needs. That's what's going to fix our problems. And I just wanted to recruit 1 million people